Hello, everyone. This is Bill Griffin. Welcome to Different Take Podcast. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share, comment. I really appreciate everybody watching. New episodes Tuesdays and Thursdays. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. John Chan, the GOP candidate for House District 97. Mr. Chan resides in Duluth, Georgia, and has been a resident of Georgia for 4 years. He is a historic restoration contractor. And interesting thing about would you prefer Ms. Chan or John?
Either way, John's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, John, the interesting thing is very interesting. Your parents fled Communist China in 1949 to Hong Kong, and then came to the U.S. in 1966 to avoid the possibility of Hong Kong being overtaken by Communist China. And thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's great to be here.
So if you could tell us a little bit about your district.
Sure. So it starts off over in a little bit of Norcross and then comes eastward to Peachtree Corners. And then it's got Berkeley Lake, and then a small portion of Duluth, which is where I reside.
You describe yourself as an America First conservative. What does that mean?
So basically, it means that we're keeping the idea of America and the Constitution first. We have all this money going abroad to Ukraine and, all these different places. And it's like, we need this money here at home. We need basically less government interfering with our lives and less of the basically just gifts of handouts. We need to educate our people, our citizens. We need to get them producing without government interference and having less taxes so that they can actually use the money that they work so hard for, And it also means having a very strong border so that you don't have criminal elements, drugs, and all that kind of thing coming across. You do have immigration of people that can get across, but you want to know who they are, meaning you don't want these criminals, you don't want drugs, you don't want sex trafficking, you don't want all these elements. And in my mind, I think that all of these people that are here illegally that aren't producing or are criminals should be deported. And then all of the people that are actually producing, they're working, they should have a path to citizenship. Because what is America? What is the United States? It's a melting pot of people from all over the world. Germany, Italy, China, Japan, South America. All these people have come to the United States to be a part of the American dream. And as long as they're productive, they should have a path to citizenship. But if they're here illegally, but living off the system, or they're engaged in criminal activities of drugs, sex trafficking, robberies, whatever it is, they should automatically be deported and not allowed back in. And if you do this, you'll have a very strong, productive country. And I would have to say that I'm kind of a living example of that. You mentioned that my parents, they fled Communist China in 1949. Well, yeah, they fled on foot. They had to carry my oldest brother, who was 4 at the time, from China to Hong Kong because they saw what the communists were doing. They were basically stopping any form of communication. They were taking anybody that they thought was the opposition and either imprisoning them or murdering them or torturing them to death. And it was really, really scary. So I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
Oh, no. Please go ahead.
Okay, so when they got to Hong Kong in 1966, they had nothing but what they could carry. So they saved up their money to come over here to the United States. And again, they got here with very little. So I grew up very poor. And English was a second language to me because in the household, we spoke Chinese. And so it was tough. You know, you get to kindergarten and you don't really speak English very well. You know, I had to go to summer school because my speech was, you know, bad. You don't understand, you know, a lot of things. You know, most of my friends were Catholics or Christians, and I didn't know anything about that. There was little league football and baseball. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know anything about American culture. But through working hard and perseverance and just going for it, you know, today my brother and I own a construction company that does historic restoration work. We have approximately 120 employees, and we've won the highest awards in anything in our trades. You know, the National Roofing Contractors Association Gold Circle Award multiple times, Better Business Bureau International Award for Marketplace Ethics. You know, we're the only American company that's ever won the international award for Project of the Year. It was for our steeple work in Iowa. And so if you look at that and you look at where my parents came from and how I grew up, that's kind of the American dream. And that's what I consider America first. Let's help the people that help themselves and get our education system right and get drugs and all the illegal activities out. I know I went on there, but that's the answer to the
That's
question.
great. I get into some questions of what you think the state legislature should do. What can the state do or should do about high crime, especially in the Atlanta metro area?
Well, we really need to fully fund the police so that we can protect personal property and also ensure that the citizens of Georgia feel safe, you know, that they can go out to restaurants, they can go shopping without being worried about being carjacked or robbed or, you know, just right here. Well, it's actually near here, I should say. I live in Duluth, but over in Peachtree Corners, I've gone to get gas there, the QT gas station. There was a murder there of somebody that was trying to get air in his tire. You know, we've got to stop all of that activity. We've got you know, these guys that take over the streets and they do donuts in the middle of the street and stop all the traffic. And you know, it's frustrating for citizens to not be able to produce because there's people stopping their livelihood, or taking their lives, or in fear because of robberies or whatnot. So we've got to ensure that people feel safe, that their personal property is protected and they're protected.
What types of things can the state government do to enhance that?
Well, there's a lot of different things. Number one is that it can fully fund the police, the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and keep crime at a low rate. We can also take any of these illegals that are criminals, and we should work with the U.S. government to have them deported. And then we can also have programs. So there's all kinds of various programs you can do, like after school programs, sports programs that keep the youth occupied with something productive rather than going out on the streets, doing donuts, robbing people, and things like that. So I
What
think that if, oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you make sure that the education system is good and that there's activities for our youth, that they have something to look forward to, you're going to really curb these criminal activities.
What do you think about the concept of school choice K through 12?
I think it's a big thing. I think it's vital that you have a choice, because if you fund these schools and everybody's forced to go there no matter what, well, there's no incentive for them to do any better. So I think you have to have a choice there. And when you have that choice, and there's competition, what does competition breed? Better and better performance. So that's definitely something that I'm for.
I was interviewing another candidate that mentioned there is some of the incentives are sort of perverse in that the worse the schools are, they tend to get more funding. You have a bad school, you need to fix it, so you pour more money at it, and it gets worse, so you need to throw more money at it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's rewarding somebody or some organization that their statistics are down. And you never do that, because they'll just continue to go down, and then you're going to throw more and more and more money at it. So the idea is actually to penalize those schools that are doing bad, find out what it is that they're doing wrong, and then correct those things. And if you reward the schools that are doing well, everybody's going to want to do well. And it's the same in any category, say in business. A lot of people ask how we got to our size. You're talking about a company that started off in somebody's kitchen, and we've got 120 employees, all these awards. I just looked at our payroll recently, and of the 120 employees, 15 of them have 20 or more years in the company. And I hear that's unheard of. But the thing of it is if you basically reward your people for high production, for going, beyond what their job is, and you reward them. So, let's say they've traveled a lot and they go to all these different places all over the country for you. Well, they get a bonus every week, or I'm sorry, every quarter for the number of days that they travel. So when you reward these guys for this, they go, oh my gosh, I want to do more. I want to do more. I want to do more. And you get great products, and you get guys that want to stay with you. But if you take the lowest guy in the totem pole and you say, okay, I'm going to give that guy $25 an hour, but my best guy only makes $30 an hour, he's going to feel horrible, because he's like, okay, here's a guy that knows nothing, and I'm carrying him, and I barely make more than him. So if you reward the guys that do well for you, you're going to get a great company. The same goes for a school or anything else. If you reward the people or the schools or the organizations that produce, you're going to get more and more and more production instead of less.
What do you think ratio ought to be? For example, if it costs the government $10,000 per pupil, what should be the voucher that the parent receives to if they chose to go to a private school? What should that amount be?
I would say it's most of it. I can't say exactly without investigating, each school system and finding out what the bare minimum is for them to run and all that. But it should be most of it.
Yeah, there was a bill that did not pass the last legislative session. What do you find when you talk with voters, or anyone, I suppose, voters in your district? What is the hesitancy? What is the resistance to this concept?
Well, the resistance to this concept is it's kind of twofold. Number one is they've ingrained this into our education system and society, that people are disadvantaged and they need help, meaning they need funding, they need extra care, that they've been wronged, and all of this. And I have to say something about that, because I understand that there's inequities in life. There certainly are. There's racism, there's all kinds of issues that a person runs into. But instead of looking so hard at those inequities, what happens is, if you just keep concentrating on those inequities, you actually get more and more of the inequities. But if you look at it like, what do I have to do to get ahead? You keep your eye focused on that mountain, on that goal, on that target, and you just keep on going and going and going until you attain it. And so the focus has a big thing to do with how successful a person is. It's kind of like if you're running off to fight a fire at a house, and a little dog starts barking and gnawing at your leg, you don't stop to fight the dog. You kind of say, okay, that kind of hurts, but I've got a fire to put out. I don't care about the dog. And I think that too many people start looking at the dog and at the, maybe on the way to the fire, you had to climb a fence and you cut your leg, and, you did something else. You dropped your axe, and too many people are focused on the dog, the cut on their leg, and the dropped axe instead of the fire. You've got to focus on the fire. And so it's like, so many people are focused on the inequities of life, racism, whatever, gender inequality, whatever inequalities there are. But the thing of it is that if you focus on your goals, that's what you're going to get. And that's why I look at all the things of racism, etc., like, that I grew up with. It's like, okay, great. I can beat that.
I know in Gwinnett County, the second most populated county in Georgia, huge school system. And in their school board meetings, there's a parade of people at their school board meetings, and they talk about anti-racism, equity, diversity, colonialism, it seems to me just an inordinate amount of time spent on that, and a much smaller amount of time spent on the things that are important.
Sure.
Kids learning the basic skills that they need to survive and so forth. So what do you think about, for example, in Florida, they banned the teaching of CRT, but then the people that are promoting clearly the components of CRT say they're not teaching it. What do you think about all that?
Well, it's kind of like this. The media is creating this division. The whole idea of CRT, all these inequities, what it does is it gets people riled up. It gets their emotions going about how, they've been wronged. And the thing of it is that you'll never, ever eliminate that. And what I mean by that is that people of like minds generally get together. So if you're a Georgia Bulldog fan, you're going to start talking to a lot of Georgia Bulldog football guys, and if you're a Catholic, you're going to tend to gravitate to people who are Catholic. And if a Buddhist walks up, they may or may not have anything against him, but they feel more connected with their kind, so to speak. And that's why here in the US, especially in the old days, you had like Chinatown, Little Italy, in LA, you have Little Tokyo. They feel better amongst people that they have a common reality with. So when a stranger walks up, a white man or a black man walks into a restaurant in Little Tokyo, this person is different, and there's nothing wrong with being different. It's great to actually interact with a lot of different people and races and cultures because you learn so much. I actually love traveling because that's one of the things that you really meet people of different cultures, different backgrounds, different ideologies. And instead of saying that you're disadvantaged because of it, I don't think that's the case. I think the case actually is you should embrace people of different cultures, different nationalities, different sexual orientations, different everything. But if you look at what the media does, they put this whole thing of, okay, there's Republicans, there's Democrats, and they both are bad, meaning that to the Democrats, the Republicans are bad, the Democrats are bad, they're evil. And that creates that division. That creates that division when, somebody says, look at this whole CRT thing. And then the other side says, well, we've got this whole problem with racism. And what it's doing is it's stirring up people's emotions and they're getting emotionally charged over it. So now they're mad. They hate the other side. And that's all created by media. And what you really want to do is you want to have the correct goals. And with the correct goals, you want everybody to work towards those goals. So I want to be able to work with Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarians to these goals. And the goals would be, let's fully fund the police so that we can have what? Safety, that we can have personal property that's protected, that we can do what? That we can keep the hard-earned money that we work all day for, so that we don't have spiraling inflation. Look at what you paid for gas yesterday versus a couple years ago. You mentioned that we're a historic restoration contractor. Sometimes we bring in containers from, say, Spain. Well, 2-3 years ago, container was what, $3,500, $3,800. Well, now, sometimes I get quotes that are like $17,000, $18,000. And that's crazy. Same with trucking. So sorry to ramble on, but it's just something that I'm passionate about, that if you keep your eye on the goal and get everybody working towards that goal, you're going to attain it every single time. But if you look at the differences between me and you and this guy and that guy and get us all riled up to where you're my enemy, that guy's my enemy, nothing ever gets done. And that's what's happening. We've got to look at what we need for the state of Georgia and for this district and get that done.
There's no question it's easier to manipulate opinions if people are thinking about something emotionally instead of logically. Yeah. So do you think that it should be that the state of Georgia should codify not teaching CRT and K through 12?
Yes. And this may be controversial, but you have to understand what it is that CRT does. It really divides people. It says that you've basically grown up as a racist and this whole system is set up that way. Again, that's kind of true to a degree, to the degree that I was explaining before, that, you've got 3 Catholics and a Buddhist walk in. You have 3 Asians and a white person walks in, a person is going to be more comfortable with people that he has a reality with. And you're never, ever going to change that, because when you have a reality with somebody, you're going to be more inclined to get into communication with them. You're going to be more inclined to have affinity or a likingness to them. And so when the odd person comes in, they're automatically the outsider. But you don't want to go, okay, he's the outsider, I want him, stuck over there. You want to say, well, come on in. Tell us how you're different. Oh, well, that's cool. Okay, so the project that we're working on is Project X. And Project X means that you're safe. You have your own personal property, and you're not in fear of somebody stealing it or degrading it in some way. That when you work, that you get to keep your money instead of it being sent over to Ukraine or wherever. All of these things that, you've got drug education so that, you don't have this rampant drug issue. These are the goals that we want to work for. How do they sound to you? They sound great. Okay, so let's do this to get these things in, and let's not worry about me being Chinese and you being white and you being black and you being this and you being that and me being this. It's like, let's all work together. And that's a huge thing in getting products. Like I said, people ask me all the time, how did you grow a company from nothing to 120? How do you get all these awards? How do you have employees that stay with you for such a long time? And the whole issue is that we've got a job to do. We're going to go for it. And I don't care if you're white, black, green, red. I don't care if you're Catholic or Christian or Buddhist or atheist. I don't really care. As long as you're a good person, let's find the common goal and let's kick the door down.
Yeah, one more question about schools. In Florida, they passed a law banning the teaching of discussion of sexual orientation with children K-3. Do you think Georgia ought to do the same thing?
Yes, and I think that Georgia should actually expand it. I hate this indoctrination of children on sex education, sexual orientation, all these different things. It's like, let's teach them the things that matter: reading, writing, arithmetic, the 3 R's back from the old days. I'm probably dating myself by saying the 3 R's, but it's like, if you teach kids to use the basics, they will be able to figure out the rest as it comes along. And if you try and push in all of these odd concepts, they're going to be spinning in this whole mess of whatever. It's like, those things aren't really that necessary to a kid. What's necessary is the basics of, how do I study? How do I learn the English language so that I can write letters, reports, whatever. Mathematics. I remember back in the day hearing kids saying, well, what am I going to use this for? I use math every single day. I mean, not that everybody else would, but I read blueprints and I do takeoffs and I figure out the square footages of things. And it's like, I'm really fast at it because I knew that that would be valuable. So those are the things that are important to a kid, and not all of that other junk.
It's also, some topics should be left to the parents.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, because that's just making things a lot more confusing for children. But I want to ask you about the Georgia state tax policy. Marginal individual rates 5.75, the corporate rates 5.75. What would you like to see that changed? And if so, how?
Well, I think the whole tax system, not just in Georgia, but in the United States, needs overhaul. Okay. So, I think they should get rid of Georgia state income tax. That's going to bring in businesses, that's going to bring in people, and they're going to want to work harder and harder because they're getting what? To keep more and more of their money, right? And if you look at what happens with income tax, it's a tax on every dollar that you earn. So when you get so far, people are like, well, I don't really want to do anymore because I don't want to get taxed. But if you actually got rid of the income tax, you got rid of the IRS, oh my gosh, you'd save so much money. But what would you have? You would have a national sales tax. If you had a national sales tax, what does that encourage? It encourages saving and not spending. But what does it also do? It also taxes the people that can afford it. Meaning, if I were to buy a Lamborghini or a Gulfstream, I think a Gulfstream is what, $45 million or whatever it is. If you have a tax on national sales tax, and then you also had a tax on luxuries, such as a Gulfstream, such as a Lamborghini, you would get so much money from that tax system that it would basically handle the debt. The reason is that the people that have huge incomes also have loopholes to write everything off. So a lot of your major corporations don't pay hardly any tax. A lot of your very, very wealthy people don't really pay a tax. And what they do is they make donations to various entities that do the things that they want, or but who actually pays? Who pays is mainly the middle class. All the people that are whether lower middle class or upper middle class, they're taking the brunt of it. And when you tax the income, like I said, what are you doing? You're focusing on curbing income. You're focusing on curbing people's desire to produce. But if you flip it and you tax the spending, what does that do? It promotes savings. And then it also is, especially if you put the luxury tax in, it gets you a lot more money. It stops all of those loopholes. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, the tax code, the IRS tax code, of course, I know you're in for state representative, but there is, it affects the tax you pay in Georgia, which isn't, 5.75% is not insignificant. The tax code is so complex that
Yes.
the IRS, when they expand, and they may need some serious upgrading, but it's because of the tax code. Congress isn't focusing on overhauling the tax code. They're just focusing on let's hire more agents, apparently. But
Right.
they can't go after the wealthy people because they have, for a lot of reasons, they have to comply with the tax code.
Right, exactly. And these,
I think a lot of people don't understand that because the tax code's the issue. It's not, the wealthy people aren't paying. They may have tax avoidance strategies, but they're legal.
Exactly. So that's what I was saying. It's like when you add 87,000 new employees, what does that do? That makes our deficit that much more. But if you actually got rid of all those people, dismantle the entire IRS, and you had a national sales tax, well, there's no tax avoidance, because you buy something, you pay tax.
Enforcement is way simpler.
Yeah, exactly. So now you don't have those legal loopholes that Amazon and whoever else, they avoid the tax legally. They do that, and all of a sudden there's less money in the coffers. But if you're paying tax every single time you purchase any good, well, now you've got all kinds of money because nobody is avoiding that. And then you've got the money in the coffers, and you've also got savings. People are going to want to save more rather than spend it.
And people's lives are a little easier too. What do you think about the next pandemic that comes along, either the state or at the county level, employing these severe restrictions that they did that were done in the spring of 2020?
I'm 100% against that, and it's kind of funny to hear from me because we were considered an essential business. But the way I look at it is everyone's essential. Who's to say that you're not essential, you're essential, you're not essential? Nobody has that right, and I don't think that that's something that government should get into. I think that's extremely unfair, and I don't think that they should have had these lockdowns. And if they did, just to see more about the pandemic, it should be something like a week or two. It should never go on and on like this. And there's no reason why your big stores can be open and your small stores can't. That makes no sense to me, that you can go to Home Depot or Walmart or wherever, but you can't go to Joe Smith's butcher shop. And that's just insanity to me. So I don't think that that should be allowed. And really, it's not per the Constitution. And I think that we have to get back to the Constitution as a nation, because the Constitution really lays out the way to flourish and prosper in this nation, in this state, in this area, District 97, where I'm running.
So in Georgia, the way this went down was the county governments initiated these lockdowns, and then the state took over. And then when the state took over and they reopened, the legislature gave the governor the power to prevent counties from imposing a new lockdown. So what I'm hearing you say is that the state should somehow codify that this can't ever be done. Maybe I guess I'm not sure how the legislature is going to tackle this, if they do at all.
Well, I think that as a legislature, we have to get together as a group. And like I was saying before, we say, okay, this is the goal, and this is the way that we get there. And we have to take a look at all the different avenues. We have to take a look at all the facts, and not just the facts that are fed to us. That's one of the things that you have to understand, that certain groups or people may have a slant due to finances or whatever, that they're going to want to push a certain agenda. And I think that you have to look at all of the facts and all of the data, not the ones that are just given to you by the mainstream media, but exactly what's happening, how many deaths there are, how it's spread, and act responsibly and go for whatever goal that is that you have. So, as a legislature, that's what we need to do, that, we have to establish where we're going and then go get it.
I thought it was a little ironic that the counties were really driving the lockdowns. I'm sure, for example, the Gwinnett County commissioners, presumably, would, if asked what the benefit is, they would say, oh, we're a county. We don't have the resources to know what the benefit is, but we have the power to shut you down. I think that's very ironic. What do you think about that?
Yes, it is very ironic. A lot of times people don't want to take the responsibility for things. And I think that as an elected official, you've got to step over that line and go, okay, we're going to take responsibility, because we're going to look at the facts and then we're going to act responsibly. And I think it has to be done without taking any money or any gifts from private corporations or any entities that have some benefit from shutdowns or whatever it is. As a legislature, you've got to get together as a group and decide what's best for all of the residents.
What's an issue you think Democrats and Republicans in the state legislature could agree upon?
Well, I think you could agree upon that people should be able to maintain their own private property safely, that they're not in fear of, getting robbed, getting their houses or buildings vandalized, that they feel safe. I think that's, should be really high up there, that you feel safe in your neighborhoods. And, so I think that no matter who you are, you have to be able to agree to that. Okay. Number two, I think you have to be able to agree to, let's do everything we can to keep the prices down. Let's do everything we can to stop spiraling inflation. I think another thing that we can agree to is, let's halt drugs and their expansion through Georgia, through the United States. I think that you've got to be able to look and say, hey, let's stop criminal activities and gangs proliferating through Georgia and the United States. I mean, I think a lot of these things are very, very basic. What happens, like I said, is that you get media as well as private companies or these groups that have a hidden agenda, and they go in and they start attacking people on both sides, and they create division. And when this division is created, what do you get? You get guys are really charged up, beefed up, and they hate their neighbor because he's a different religion, he's a different color, he's got a different sexual orientation, he's a different race, and there's all this division. And so they're fighting on the division rather than saying, hey, let's stop crime, let's be safe. Hey, let's stop the proliferation of drugs. Hey, these are the things that are important, not that you and I are different in some way and that I've got some upset with you. Let's not do that. Let's instead focus on the goals of what the great state of Georgia needs so that we can attain that rather than fight amongst ourselves.
What's the big thing that you would disagree with with your opponent?
Well, there's a lot of different things, and I'm not into all the social programs to make people weaker. I'm into social programs that will help and benefit people. And what I mean by that is that if you give a person, well, there's an old saying, if you give a person a fish and you give them a fish and you give them a fish, it's much wiser to teach the person how to fish. Okay. So I'm not for handouts. What I'm for is I'm for bettering a person, educating them, training them. I don't want to create division. I don't want to say, this person's a different race, this person's a different whatever. And I don't really care about that. I care about, let's get the residents of Georgia to be more prosperous. Let's get them to be safe. Let's get them to be, really fine with having their personal property and not being worried about somebody defacing it, destroying it. Let's do that. Let's create unity rather than division.
Do you think the state should eliminate any training programs for state employees or even public school systems that have diversity, equity, inclusion programs? Should the state just abolish all of that?
Okay, so here's the thing. It's not that it should be abolished, but it's the way that it's taught. Okay, the way that it's taught is that you've got these other groups and outlying whatevers, and they're making them into disadvantaged people. And just like I was saying before, that there's no one that's not essential. You don't want to take too much time in looking at the disadvantages, because everybody has advantages, meaning that one guy is great with math, one guy is really artistic, one guy is amazing with, I don't know, language. And rather than focus on what's quote unquote wrong with a person and how they're an outlier, let's instead focus on how we can work together and utilize each and every one of our greatnesses and come up with solutions. That's how you do better. That's how you get more done. That's how you attain goals. But if you're focused on what's wrong with a person and how they're different than you, and you've got to walk on eggshells because of it, well, what's going to happen is everybody's so careful about what to say, what not to say, that nothing ever gets done. And that's what you have in government. Unfortunately, that's what you have in a lot of organizations. And what you need to do is focus on the greatnesses of each of these societies, each of these people. Like I said, I love to travel because you get to see all these interesting things. It's like, say in Peru, you got to see that culture. You got to see, what they built, like at Machu Picchu back in 1500. You got to see the greatness of the Peruvian people, right? Or if you go to, gosh, even here in the United States, you go down to Louisiana, you go to New Orleans, and you get to see what? You get to see what they did with food, or what they did with architecture. Some of the architecture in New Orleans is amazing. But rather than to say, there are these strange Cajuns, no, you go, I want to embrace that great food, that great architecture. Just like I said with Peru, or with any other ethnicity or whatever. I remember being in Baltimore, and I was doing an estimate there, and there was this band. They're just street performers, and they were playing like drums on like a little plastic can, and And I was just like, wow, this is really cool. So, I actually stopped and listened, and it's just like, let's embrace all of that rather than going, well, those people are a black group. These people in Louisiana are Cajuns. Well, the Peruvians, they're not even American, or saying the opposite, going, okay, well, we have to take care of these people because they're black and they're different. We have to take care of these people because they're Cajun and they're different, or immigrants from wherever because they're different. No, let's not do that. Let's embrace the greatness and the beauty of each and every person, what they bring to the table.
I want to ask you, so I hear what you say is, let's focus on the positive, not the negative. What can,
Absolutely.
how people, let's bring people together, not, oh, we need to, all the negativity and that kind of thing. I see, for example, the Gwinnett School Board meetings, you can look at the videos, and it's a parade of people that talk about equity, anti-racism, systemic racism. They talk about colonization, and it just seems inordinate, and it just such a. While I'm watching, I'm just, wow, this is, how do you spend so much time thinking about all this negativity? But so I think that's what I think what you're saying is, let's turn around and make it a positive thing, not all of.
Sure. What you're talking about, the school board meetings, what happens is you've got a dog chasing its tail and it's never going to catch it. So no matter how much these people preach all of this stuff, what happens is a further and further division of people.
And no end game.
Yeah. Yeah. So instead of doing that, instead of focusing on how somebody's been wronged, as I said, what happens is if you get these social programs where people are just given something for nothing, there's no exchange given. What happens is these people are now having their hand out expecting the next gift, Where is my next fish? Where's my next fish? And instead of going, okay, well, you're going to have to go catch the fish yourself. I'm going to teach you how to do it. And then what happens? Well, that person doesn't have their hand out anymore. But when they catch their first fish, they're excited, they're like, I got my first fish. And when they get a really big fish, they're like, oh my gosh. And then their drive is there to get the next one, And then they want to get, they want to go out and get 12 of them. Now they want to go out and get 20 of them, So what happens is they get pushed, and then they get goals, and then they attain those goals, and they get more and more alive, and they get more and more production. What happens is if you let a person be idle and say, give me a fish, give me a fish, give me a fish, give me a fish, they get more and more dead. They die, So that's the difference. It's like focusing on that stuff causes a person to go downhill and be able to attain less and less and less in life. And they're always looking for a way to skirt the system or some angle to get the next handout, instead of being proud of themselves for having caught the fish or the 10 fish or the giant fish or whatever, or having a fleet of fishing boats. That's what happens when you teach a person how to fish. And I say, let's teach people how to fish, and let's all work together, and let's all admire our differences rather than saying, you're this, you're that. Oh, I don't like you, because, and all that does is it basically gets a person all beefed up at his neighbor, and you've got all this division. Let's get rid of that division and let's work together.
Really appreciate you doing this. I got a couple more questions. I ask you to brace yourself for this one, because
Sure.
I've asked this identical question to candidates, and sometimes I get the most perplexed look. So this has to do with election law, and there's probably other laws other aspects of the law that you might want to address. But here's my question. Is it unreasonable for citizens to believe that voting ought to be done in complete secrecy?
No, it should be done in complete secrecy. Or do you mean the actual voting or the
actual voting, the whole
Yeah,
process?
actual voting should be done in complete secrecy. And, what happens is the media has created such division that if you vote a different way than me, I start getting upset, right? And we don't want that. You have your opinion, I have mine. That's great. I don't care that you have a different opinion. I don't care that you think differently than I. That's part of being in the United States. You should have your opinion just like I should have mine, just like anybody else should have theirs. And you should be able to vote in total privacy, total secrecy, without any other outside influence.
One of the things that, and the reason I mention this is one of the things that when I ask a person, the Democrats that I've interviewed, and I've had very good conversations. The point that I bring up with regard to voting by mail is there is no assurance that you will vote in secret. It may be optional, but it may not be optional at all. For example, a parent has a college age child and they say, hey, I want to watch you vote. Or you have an apathetic voter who may sell their vote, or any variety of coercive things or intimidate people for their votes and that sort. So the response is, when I say this, is always, well, there's no evidence that happens, and well, that's not really, it's unknowable. So you can't know that. You can't know what people do in their own homes or what they do with that ballot by mail. So I think a lot of people are very much against the voting by mail because it is inherently open to all these other things. So you don't really get the true measure of what the will of the people are. What do you think about all that?
Well, I think that everybody should vote in person unless you obtain an absentee ballot. And an absentee ballot would go to those people who may be physically unable, or they have a trip planned. They're out of town. They can't vote. There should be various circumstances where a person can absentee vote. But I think in general, we need to vote at the station. And actually, I think they should be paper ballots. I don't actually like the idea of a machine, because who's to say that that machine can't be corrupted? I mean, any great hacker can hack into any machine.
Or there's the perception that it can be corrupted.
That's correct. So I think that A, it should be paper ballots, and B, you should vote in person, and in extenuating circumstances, you're in the hospital, whatever, something that is reasonable, you can submit for an absentee ballot. But other than that, I don't think that you should be able to vote by mail. And I think that you have to vote in private in a booth by yourself. There can't be somebody else in the booth with you. I just think that that's how it should go, because it's something that's been granted to us through the generations of the United States, and that's our right.
What do you think there's a political appetite to change the law to implement no excuse voting by mail?
Well, there's all these speculations about various things happening with the vote, and they may be true, they may not be. But what I'm saying is that for all future elections, if we just went straight to paper ballots, voting in person, unless you have some extenuating circumstance, then you can submit for an absentee ballot. but I don't believe in just all of these unsolicited mail-in ballots. I just don't think that's right.
What this has been a big topic this year. What abortion laws do you think it should be in place? What restrictions, if any, should be placed on abortions?
Well, I'm in favor of the heartbeat bill. I think that's a good place to start. I don't have opinions any other way right now. Basically, I feel like if I'm an elected official, I have to vote the way my constituents want me to vote. So I would basically have to have an open forum and find out how people felt. But right now, I would say that I support the heartbeat bill.
But you do, so you do support some restrictions, not to put words in your mouth, but that would be first trimester or less.
Yes, the reason is that this is strange and kind of gross to me that people actually use abortion as their way of practicing contraception. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like, really, it's like that's kind of crazy. So yes, I do support some type of restrictions, but yeah, I don't think that you can completely restrict it, but yeah, I support the heartbeat bill.
The thing that's a lot of public outcry about was that this idea, I think people are understand Roe versus Wade granted an unfettered right, which that was never the case. There was always a balance between the rights of the unborn and the mother, is the way that opinion was written. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. It's been and to your point earlier, the media has an interest in not telling people the truth about that.
That's correct. And, it kind of more or less throws things back to the states. And that, I believe, is actually very valuable. And here's why. I don't want to create a mystery here, but I believe that the powers should go back to the state on many, many issues. We're the United States of America. And I think each and every state should govern itself in the way it sees fit. And the federal government should actually reduce its numbers and keep its nose out of a lot of the state's business. I think that the federal government has gotten so large and unwieldy that it can't get anything done. If you look at the large government organizations, the IRS, the post office, the Social Security Administration, a lot of those, actually not even a lot of them, I would say all of them, do not function well. Why? Because they keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they try and regulate more and more and more. But instead, what they should do is let the people produce and keep their income, rather than making this law and that law and then this regulation and then overseeing it in this way and that way. Like I said earlier, I think that the IRS should be abolished. I think that there should be a national sales tax. That way you don't have people skirting paying taxes. Your really, really wealthy people really avoid taxes. And if you did it with a national sales tax, they're going to pay. Every single time they're going to pay. And, you get like I said, the $45 million Gulfstream or the, $200,000 Lamborghini. It's like, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money that the federal government would rake in rather than losing on a yearly basis. And the other thing of that is that it promotes savings. What happens is, I think a lot of people focus on the wrong thing to try and get ahead. To get ahead, you've got to focus on your goals. You can't focus on, like I said, the dog that's nipping at your leg when you're out to fight a fire. And too often, especially in government organizations, they're fighting the dog. They're not only are they fighting, but the dog is now getting mad because you're swatting him and he's biting you even harder. And that's why people are so riled up. Their emotions have gotten the best of them, and they're really, really attacking that dog. But they've lost sight of the house that's on fire and ready to fall over because it's still burning.
Right. What before we wrap up, what is there anything else you like to or topic that you'd like to talk about?
Well, there is one. It's that I never intended on running. I've never thought in a million years I would ever run for public office. But I just look at the state of society today, and what do I see? I see a lot of division. I see Democrats that hate Republicans, Republicans that hate Democrats, that, this group is calling this group racist, and this group's calling this group racist, and, all these really strange concepts happening that are causing what? High crime, proliferation of drugs, you name it, inflation spiraling out of control. And what I see is that I think that people, regular people, I consider myself just a regular citizen, need to step up and take office. Be a part of city council, be a part of your school board, be a part of your state and local governments, be active in your community to make sure that the community is doing better. Just take that next step to do better. Let's get everyone together and admire each other's differences and how everybody can bring something new to the table to help us attain the goals that we want for our society. Like I said, I think that everybody can agree on, let's keep our properties safe and secure. Let's keep the crime rate down so that you're safe when you go out and have dinner or when you go out shopping. Let's get rid of the proliferation of drugs and gangs. I think these are all things that we can agree on. Let's handle the whole situation with inflation spiraling out of control. Let's handle the whole problem with the supply chain. A lot of the supply chain is happening because of the poor policies implemented by big government that's so unwieldy that it doesn't know what the right hand or the left hand is doing at the same time. So I guess my parting words would be, let's embrace our differences. Let's find the common goals that we can all agree on, and let's just get the job done.
Well, thank you for doing this. I have talking with John Chan, the GOP candidate for Georgia House District 97. And thanks so much for doing this. How can people find you?
Right on my website, it's johnchan4ga.com. And if you like what I said, there's a donate button, or, you can volunteer to help us. Just this last weekend, we were at Peachtree Corners. It was called Light Up the Corners. So we were out with the John Chan t-shirts and talking to people. So I would love to talk to you.
And that's John Chan, JOHNCHAN, the number 4GA.com.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks again. You've been watching the Different Take podcast with Bill Griffin. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share, comment, and I really appreciate support. and the encouragement I get to do this. And thank you.